Thanks for joining us today. I'm Professor Sean Scott. I'm a faculty member at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, and I'm currently serving as the Associate Director of the Association of American Law Schools. And with me here today is Professor Aman Gebru. He is currently a visiting assistant professor at Cardozo Law School, and in the fall will be going to Duquesne School of Law as an assistant professor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So increasingly, law faculty who are entering the profession have had either a VAP or a fellowship before going onto the teaching market. And given the prevalence of that experience with candidates, we thought it would be really helpful to spend some time talking to somebody who's currently in a VAP. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Today I want to talk about get some information about your experience and your thoughts about the value of doing a VAP or a fellowship. So if we can start with you talking a little bit about how you found out about the fellowship at Cardozo.
Sure. So it's kind of by accident, if you will, but also I think there's a point to be made about, for people that are looking to get a VAP. So I just happened to be at a conference in Boston at Boston University presenting a paper, and my former professors were there, so we were just catching up. One of my professors then suggested, so-and-so at Cardozo University has been talking to people about this potential position, and that he was encouraging people to apply. And so right there, she introduced me to him, and he encouraged me to apply, and that's how you got.
The rest is history.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you have found to be the advantages of the VAP, and maybe talk some about the formal and informal support that you get during the course of the VAP?
Sure, yeah. So I can both talk about particularly the Cardozo position, but also about VAPs, because I've talked to people who've done VAPs as well in other places. So the advantages first of doing a VAP. One, I think the main one that I think is key for people that want to go in the market is the fact that you're really a part of the faculty when you're a VAP, right? So you attend faculty meetings, you present papers. For example, the Cardozo position has a workshop, the junior faculty workshop, which is kind of specifically dedicated to people. It's not strict, but to people who've only been teaching for about 3-4 years at Cardozo and VAPs. And so you really have this really interesting, comfortable environment where people present their papers and get feedback in a kind of accessible, less kind of high stakes kind of position. So that's been great.
And how long is the VAP?
It's a 2-year position that I'm doing. Cardozo also has a 1-year visiting position. My personal experience is that the 2-year position allows you to kind of use the first year to kind of get settled, teach courses, and kind of develop your scholarship. And on your second year, you can actually go on the market and be comfortable in that position. Okay. I think the 1-year VAP positions might have that disadvantage of teaching for the first time and still going on the market in the semester. Yeah.
Right.
So I'd say that's what, being a real member of the faculty would be one of the key benefits of doing a VAP. Teaching courses and preferably teaching 1L courses, I think, is the other big aspect of it. You can teach a lot of different courses, but as a VAP, you're really teaching core courses, doctrinal courses. And I think when it's time to go on the market, committees really look at that positively. If you've already had kind of a track record of teaching, and especially if you have student evaluations, that's all the committee needs to assess whether you can teach or not.
And does the program support you in terms of preparing you for the market? So do they help you with the research agenda? Do they kind of go through the FAR form?
Yes, right. So that's actually one of the best things about my experience at Cardozo is that, and I've only done this VAP, right? But in talking to people from other schools, I think there are good VAPs and not so good VAPs, I guess. And so kind of assessing that might be good for people that are applying. So the Cardozo position is one of the good ones. It's a great program, and also part of the reason why I accepted the offer is because I've seen people who've done it and then went on to do great things in academia. And so the kind of the support I received, both formal and informal. So formally, through the institution, you have, again, like I said, the junior faculty workshop. You're encouraged to come to the weekly and bi-weekly faculty talks. And the associate dean for faculty research does have that in the portfolio of helping VAPs to go on the market. And so Cardozo, Professor Chris Bacafasco is currently the associate dean for research. And he's just been great in helping me go through this process that he has seen for many years happening. So, and it's not just him, it's multiple people, but he, formally speaking, he's there for VAPs to kind of go through that process. And it includes the support includes multiple versions of your CV, file form, scholarship. You can imagine 40 to 60 page law review articles being read by these people for multiple
Oh, that's a huge benefit.
That's great. Yeah. And informally, Cardozo, and again I think other VAPs also have this experience where faculty members, senior faculty members especially, do feel kind of the struggle that junior faculty members go through when they're going on the market, right? So no matter how long it's been.
They're called flashbacks, but yes.
Yes, flashbacks for some people. And that's what I've seen at Cardozo, where even if I'm not formally approaching people, they might just say, let's go for coffee or lunch or drinks, and then we talk about this experience over a meal or a drink. And you see senior faculty members who've been on faculty hiring committees, us chairs or members, sharing their experiences from the other side. And so that's, I think, another key kind of benefit is the formal informal support.
And so can you talk a little bit about the faculty recruitment conference and what your experience was like and any advice you'd have to folks who are thinking about doing that?
Sure. I think maybe a general advice that I can give people is there are a lot of resources out there now. The AALS has great resources on that. A lot of blogs. Some law schools have publicly accessible information about that. So generally speaking, there are resources out there, and so making use of those resources is great. The other general advice I get is, you talk to multiple people and you might get some conflicting advice about what to do and what not to do. It's good to take diverse opinions from people, but I think ultimately a person needs to kind of take a break and say, what do I, after taking all of these advices, what do I want to do? And so that's the other thing. Talking about my personal experience in the in the faculty recruitment conference, I think before I went on the market, I had information about the conference, and so it wasn't new to me. And in the lead up to the actual conference, when I was formally on the market, I gathered a lot of information, and so and I think this is in part due to the fact that I did a VAP as opposed to a fresh graduate, right? And so I knew what to do, right? I had booked the hotel ahead of time in August. Some of my friends actually did not do that, and so the hotel was booked. So they had to book a hotel outside, which kind of creates some inconveniences right here and there, right? So that's one. Walking the hotel is one other kind of advice that I keep getting, right? It's a big hotel, multiple towers, and so you don't want to be confused about where you're going and the like, right? Yeah. And I was surprised, thinking about like surprising experiences, I was surprised at how fast half an hour would go by for the interviews, and so I would just encourage people to be kind of aware of that.
And so in thinking about how fast it can be, so what's the risk of that half hour speeding by so quickly?
I think you can look at it two ways, right? One is, because it's short, you might not be able to cover the things that you should or want to cover in that time. And two, maybe because you know that it's short, you might tend to speak too fast and kind of appear nervous when you're not. And so it's kind of different aspects of that exist there. So on the kind of the topics that you want to cover, but maybe not, you might not be able to cover, the experience and the advice also that I've received is one, you can have points jot down on a piece of paper ahead of time and say, in this interview with this kind of school, these are the things that I want them to know about me.
Yes.
These are the things that are relevant.
I think that's a critical point.
Yes.
Having been on hiring teams, I do think you want to go in with a clear sense of, no matter what else, these are the 3 things that I want the team to know about me.
Yeah. I think that's, and because again, time is short, knowing those points is easy, or it's going to make the process easy. And so the kind of, along the same line, you can either expect the committee members to raise those issues and kind of give you an opportunity to talk about those points. But if they don't, you can, in your response, you kind of expand, take the questions to different places and make sure that that point gets across. Right? So it's both the responsibility of the committee and the candidate to make sure that communication happens in the most optimal way. And so that's, I think that, yes, half an hour is not sufficient to decide if you're actually going to be a great professor, but that's,
well, you just need to leave enough so that they want to know more.
Yes.
Right, and they want to bring you back to campus. Did you run into the situation where you had back-to-back interviews at all, or were you careful in scheduling?
I was careful in scheduling, right? So I at least had half an hour between interviews, which allowed me to kind of walk from one room to the other. And again, if you've walked the hotel the night before, it makes it easy. You're saying, I'll get off here and walk to this location. And so it's easy if you've done it. I think committees are open to kind of rescheduling if that's a risk. And so I would advise people to just email the chair and say, I have back-to-back interviews. Can we reschedule? In the worst case scenario, if the rescheduling doesn't happen, at least the committee knows that you have this issue. And so if you're late, it might be okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, as somebody who's served on a committee, we understand that people may have multiple interviews, and I think it's perfectly fine for you to make that request of the committee, either through email previously or even when you walk in the room. I think it's perfectly acceptable to say, I'm so grateful to be here and I'm so excited about meeting the team. But I do need to let you know that I have an interview immediately following this one, so we may have to cut a little bit short, for which I apologize.
Yeah.
So I think that's none of us will be shocked if that's the case.
Yeah.
So I think that's perfectly acceptable to manage that way.
Yeah.
Any other advice that you would give people about the hiring process generally, about a VAP, about a fellowship, things to look out for when they're weighing programs?
Yeah, so I think I did a VAP before, a fellowship before this VAP actually at NYU, and so it was a short fellowship, but it was sufficient for me to kind of see what the fellowship side of things looks like, and so quickly the advantages of fellowship and disadvantages. One, it's the big advantage is you get to focus on your research. You don't necessarily have to teach a course, which if you're doing for the first time, it takes a lot of time out of your week. And so that's a big positive there. The other is you can, and because you have more time and because you're focusing on your scholarship, you can go to conferences without any restrictions of teaching a class and other responsibilities. And so that makes it open. The downside, again, is you don't teach. And so because some committees, it's not all law schools, but I think most committees do really put a high price on experience of actually teaching a course. And so that's the disadvantage of doing a fellowship, I think.
Right. And was the fellowship 1 year or 2?
It was a 1-year fellowship, but because of I was finishing up a doctorate degree, and so that meant that I had to cut it short, and so it was half a year instead of a year. But my colleagues in the same cohort have done it for a full year. And again, if that's possible, 1 year is great for a fellowship because, again, you do want to establish that strong relationship with your colleagues or faculty mentors, which again, the interview process heavily relies on personal relationship between you and your potential recommender and between the committee members on the hiring committee and the recommender. So if they know your recommenders by name or they've worked with them over the years, it's going to send a strong signal of quality.
Sure. Sure.
The longer the better in a way, but there's it could be too long
Right.
sometime.
Right. Always a balancing act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's fellowship VAP. They have both advantages and disadvantages. I think fellowships tend to pay less than VAPs in general. So that
Yes.
might be something to consider for people that have families, especially. That might be an important consideration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the other big thing that I want to note is I think AALS has done a great job of over the years collecting information and providing it to candidates. So at the faculty recruitment conference, to attend the conference the day before the actual interviews take place, I think that was
great. So yes, so we do host a workshop for candidates the day before the interviewing formally starts.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you found that useful.
Oh yeah, it was useful
to participate in. Well, I think that you've given us great insights into the process, and both the kind of weighing the values of a fellowship and a VAP. So thank you very much for coming in and making time to speak with us.
No,
and for those folks who are interested in more information about a VAP or a fellowship or about the hiring process more generally, go to our website, AALS.org, and you'll find a font of information. Thanks.